Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm happy to have you all with me today in this session. Code with Sally usually run every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We started something new now. Whenever we have great guest speakers, we'll try to run it on Tuesday. So if we have guest speaker, we'll have a Tuesday and Thursday sessions, hopefully. The best way to be updated with the sessions, the guest speakers we are having, will be to either follow us on LinkedIn or to join WhatsApp or Slack. And I will paste here in the chat the link for the community group for Code with Stanley as well. It will have all the links for WhatsApp, for Slack, and LinkedIn to make it easier for you. So feel free to join the community group and be in touch. So today is a great session. I'm super excited and happy. We have Evelyn here. Evelyn is a 10-time Salesforce certified developer and the author of the upcoming Lightning Web Component Cookbook. I won't be talking much about the book. I will let Evelyn talk about it. And also, Evelyn is a Red Woman coach. I coach as well in Red Woman. So super happy and excited and honored to have you, Evelyn. And we are all looking forward for the session. The topic is very important. A lot of people don't spend much time learning about test classes. And I feel that's a very important and critical topic to cover and to know the best practices. What are the different ways to create data, test data factory, and more as well to cover. So I will hand it over to you. If you please give us a introduction about yourself, the book, so everyone go and get it. I'm super excited for it myself and looking forward to get it. And yeah, let's take it from there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sally. I'm really excited. I love your show and have been following for a while, so really glad to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn Maguire, or as I am on LinkedIn, Evelyn McMichael Maguire. I am like Sally said, 10-time certified Salesforce developer, currently working on my integration architect certification with a group of folks that's studying for it this spring and summer. I have had 7 very eventful years in the Salesforce industry. I've worked as a consultant, ISV partner, developer, and as an in-house developer as well. So, very long, varied career, and excited to be here today to discuss some testing best practices. And I think what we're going to do today is I will show off some of the projects that you can build in the Salesforce Lightning Web Component Cookbook. And then we are going to build some test classes. We'll build a basic kind of brute force test class to show what most orgs are working with. We will then discuss a little bit about implementing the Salesforce sub provider, which is a way to implement mocking and stubbing, which is a more advanced topic. But we are going to ease our way into it and define some terms so that everyone can follow along together. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will make sure that, let's see, we have screens, desktop number 2. Perfect. Okay, so hopefully everyone is seeing Salesforce right now. This is one of the projects that, well, several projects actually, that are built out over chapters 3, 4, and 6. What we're going to be focusing on is this view context module in the bottom. So the premise of the project in the Salesforce Lightning Web Component Cookbook is you are a Salesforce developer at an art broker, and you are helping different museums to collect different artworks and borrowing them from the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Open Access API, which is awesome. It is an open source API that is under a Creative Commons Zero license. So we are able to use that and able to get some pretty cool pieces of art into our Salesforce org. So we'll take a look at that really quick. Um, in the, oh, and here's Gizmo. This is a little Easter egg. This is my cat. If there is a piece of art that is not in the public domain, you'll see Gizmo. So some of the projects we build out have some of my favorite pieces of art from the Metropolitan Museum's collection, and we build a couple of different pieces of functionality. This functionality in particular is covered in chapters 8, 9, and 10. And we do some fun stuff with data tables, building out custom components, and a bunch of other fun stuff. But going back to our top accounts module, this is basically a Lightning homepage that has a Lightning tree grid that shows pieces of art by their tag. And then we also have this contact data table that we can create an event for meeting with a specific artist's or a specific museum's chief art officer. So we can create an event. So we'll go test event, event subtype. We'll just say event, let's say March 13th, and we'll do code with Sally. Awesome. And we will see that our event has been created successfully. We have our test event here. We are coding with Sally today. And I just want to show off this component so that we know a little bit about the Apex that we're going to be looking at before we dive in. So this is also available on the account record page. If I add it to the account record page, let me do that really quick. I'm a little bit rusty with setup. I mostly focus on development tasks, so thank you for your patience with me. Let's go ahead and add our view context shell to the record page, and we can see this update in real time as well. So again, we have our data table. We select a radio button, add the event. We'll go code with Sally and event. Let's go ahead and schedule for our Thursday time at our, we'll say noon for Sally. And we're just going to do another test event here. So this functionality uses a flow. It uses some Apex, and then obviously we have the Apex selectors and controllers that allow us to get the functionality to post the event to our Salesforce page. So let's go ahead and go to Visual Studio Code, if I can get my hotkeys to work. And one of the key things that we discuss in the LWC cookbook is how to structure your Apex for LWCs. And what we do is we use a selector class. This is a pattern that is described very in depth. If you've ever heard of FFlib or the Financial Force Library, there are selector classes, domain classes, persistence layer classes cover both of those. And then we have a service class and a controller class as well. So we're going to define what each of these classes are really quick, and then we will dive into it. So our selector class is going to extend a query utility that I have built. Basically, we are going to get the contacts for each account. We pass in our account ID, and then we have our query results, and then we can search our contacts as well. This is part of chapter 10, so we'll take a look at this when we are writing our tests, but we have not viewed this functionality yet. I can show y'all towards the end of the call if y'all want to see it. We then have the service layer class, which generally is going to have our business logic as well. So in this case, we are going to just return the results of our query, which is in our contact selector class. This is a little bit of object-oriented programming principles in Apex, where we have our contact selector as a non-static class variable, and we return the results of this this instance of this contact selector class, where we call the contacts per account method for this account ID. And I'm going to pause here because static versus non-static classes and variables is something that I really struggled with at the start of my career. So I want to take a second and let's pause for any questions, because one of the things, and I'll zoom in a little bit, static methods mean that basically you don't have to have an instance of the class to go into the method. So, oh, no instance required. I hate the auto code feature. So if we were to call a static method, we go class name dot method name like that. Non-static methods, on the other hand, require an instance of the class where if we call a non-static method, it's going to be new class name. We have the instance dot method name. And we see that we instantiate our instance of the class up at the top of our class as a class variable. And then we take the instance of the class and then call the method for that instance. So want to pause because we have folks of varying levels of coding skills in here. So want to take a second to explain that and see if there's any questions.
I love your explanation, Evelyn, about the static and non-static. It's something like I noticed a lot of people struggle, as you mentioned, and
Mhm.
I would take the opportunity as well to let everyone know. I left in the chat the playlist for Apex beginners on Code with Sally. We went through like starting from variables, what are the variables, the collections, and then we went to object-oriented and we covered like what's the classes, the objects, and static and non-static as well. So feel free as well to check it. All the learning will like come together and will make it easier to like move forward with your learning experience in Apex.
Thank you for making your videos, Sally. They've been really helpful. I've sent them to so many people, and everyone I've sent them to loves them. So I just want to say thank you while I've got you on the line because
Thank
it's
you
good
so
to give people
much.
their flowers. Um,
And also, like I was telling Evelyn, like the plan is for this year at some point after finishing some important topics in Apex, we'll be starting LWC and teaching JavaScript and HTML basics and move on to the LWC. And if Evelyn allows it, like we can refer to the book. So I encourage everyone as
oh
well,
yeah,
like to go ahead and get it so you can follow along while we are building our skills in LWC.
yeah. And I just want to call out that link is a 20% discount on both the ebook and the paperback copy. So before we dive into it, any questions on static versus non-static? And yeah, the book it goes into the book starts and goes literally from 0 to 60. The first 3 chapters of the book go into Apex basics for LWC development. The first chapter is literally how to set up VS Code if you've never done it. And it goes into class structuring, wrapper classes, different design patterns for how to do Apex for LWCs. And then it goes into JavaScript basics and all kinds of other things. So I hope it's easy for newbies as well. I tried to make it go as beginner to as advanced as I could. And my favorite thing about the more advanced chapters is that sometimes the Salesforce documentation isn't very good. So I try to take the advanced topics and break them down as simply as I possibly can to show the absolute like most basic implementation of the functionality that I could think of. So you're able to see how things work with a working project that you can put in your portfolio, and then you write test classes for it at the end, which is what we'll be diving into in a second. So while we have, it looks like there's no further questions. So we'll go into the controller class, and the controller class, or the presentation layer class, as it is sometimes called, is what is going to interact with our Lightning Web Component. So basically, again, we have uh, our non-static instance of the class where if we go back to my little note here, we call the non-static by saying instance of a class name with the method name. And we can do that either by instantiating the class separately, or we can do it all in one line like I have done here, where we say new instance of the class, and then we get the contacts per account with the value of the ID string. So going back to our Salesforce org, oh, not Firefox. No, don't open Firefox. Oh my gosh. Fat fingers, it's okay. Going back to our little example, we have the view contacts, add event. This is the Lightning Web component. This is actually using the Lightning data service as well. This is a form that just inserts a task object with the LWC. And let's actually take a look at that really quick just so we can understand what that looks like. There's a flow that creates the event and task, and then we have my favorite thing about chapter 6 is because it is all about doing events, there is a flattened version of the component, and then we break it into smaller pieces so we can see exactly where the events go to. So we have a bunch of JavaScript here, which is not the main focus of this lesson, but I will call out a few points where we have API record ID means we can get the ID of the record whose page we're on. We have some fun wired methods, a connected callback, which is all described in detail in the book. And then we have some navigation where we refresh the page and go back to the original page. So going into how we would write tests for this, we are going to define a couple of different types of testing just so we can have a common terminology. So we have three main types of testing. There's integration tests, which are test interactions between multiple components and modules. So an example would be we have a test that tests a trigger, the trigger handler, and any helper classes that go with the trigger and trigger handler. These integration tests are going to perform real DML on our S objects. So it hits the databases, and these tests are kind of slow. So we are going to write our integration test first, and then we're going to see how we can make it faster. Unit testing is the other type of tests we are going to discuss today, where we test individual methods in isolation. For example, we have the methods in our selector class, which queries our database. We have our service method that just presents the query information to our controller class. And then we have our controller class that spits out our contact records into our LWC. Each of these methods is what's known as a unit. So we are going to unit test them, and we can do this without hitting the database by using a bunch of fake data, which we will define in a second. These are the fastest type of tests. And if you do it right, the last Salesforce org I was in, we ran 1,300 tests in under 8 minutes. So they're very fast. I have worked in Salesforce orgs that exclusively use integration tests that, whereas some orgs you can have, 1,300 tests running in 8 minutes, integration tests can have twice as many tests and they'll take 12 hours to run. So this is a good way to test your code and make it go snappy. And then end-to-end testing, which we will not be covering today, but I want to call out as another type of testing, is going to test the entire workflow. So an example of this would be if there's a NetSuite to Salesforce integration, NetSuite would pass the information to Salesforce. We then test that the trigger runs and our objects are updated as expected. So in the end-to-end test, we would create the records in NetSuite, make sure they pass to Salesforce, and then we'd hit the database with our trigger. Again, this hits the database, and this is the slowest type of test. So going back to Visual Studio Code.
Evelyn, we
Let's
have
go
a
ahead.
question
Yeah.
for
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Sorry, it's related to the slide. The question was saying, like, if you have a test, like a controller for the LWC that calls a service class, that calls a selector, for example, and you have a test method written that covered the controller, which calls the selector, the service and the selector class. Do you still need to write a test class separately for the selector class, or because it's covered by the testing method you wrote for the controller, you don't need to?
Yeah. So we'll see an example of this as we go through. when you write a test class for the controller method, it will test the selector and the service class as well, because the controller will pass to the service method, which then passes through to the selector method. So technically, you don't need to write these tests, but it is best practice to do so. And we'll see how quickly we can do this with mocking and stubbing. So while integration tests take a lot of time to write, uh, it's a lot easier to write the individual unit tests for uh where so stepping back a little bit, if you write an integration test that hits your controller, service, and selector class methods, that is probably acceptable. But if you're unit testing, you would want to write a unit test for each method, and we'll see why in a second. So, okay, let me close out. Let's go ahead and let's actually do an example of this, and we will close others. We'll keep our contact controller up, and then we are going to go ahead and write a test class for this. So we know that we have our contact service, we have the get contacts per account, and we have the ID value of ID string. And we're gonna, again, do kind of the brute force solution here. We will go ahead and test all three classes for the sake of time and to show how that's done. And then we'll speed it up with some unit tests. So let's go ahead and we will create an Apex class. And unit tests for the private methods via test visible, yes. So you would write unit tests for private methods with test visible, as well as the public ones. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that, one, we have 75% minimum code coverage, which if we don't test the private methods, we will not. And most organizations have a higher percentage requirement. Typically, I see a target of 95% in the orgs that I have been in for unit testing or integration tests, just general test coverage. You can't, there are some things you can't test, but generally you want to target 95% to kind of factor in for the things you can't test or the things that are very hard to test. So generally you want to get as close to 100% as possible, which includes those private methods. So, okay, let's go ahead and we'll create a new Apex class. Let's go ahead and say view contact controller underscore test is a pretty common naming convention. We're going to go ahead and hide this. And the first thing we need to do is mark our @is test. And then we can get rid of the default constructor here. And generally, test methods are going to be a private static void. We can also declare this a private and get rid of the with sharing. And the reason we want these classes to be private is because we don't want anything else accessing them. We can get rid of the with sharing because we want to, generally, if we are testing our access within the test class, we define that with something like run as, which we can get into if there's any questions about that. But let's go ahead and call this method. It should return contacts. And we don't have any parameters for our test methods. And again, we are going to go ahead and do kind of a brute force implementation here. We can go ahead and do a test setup method where we have our make data. We'll mark this a private static void as well. Private meaning that we can only use these methods within the same class. Static, again, meaning we don't need an instance of the class to make the method. So let's go ahead and say we have an account test account equals new account. Let's go name equals test account, and I think that's the required fields. We'll find out. And then we're going to go ahead and make a list of contacts that will be associated with the accounts. Because we are hitting the database here, we need to insert our test account. And then we'll go for, let's go integer II equals 0. If I could type today, II is less than 5 and II plus plus. And you'll notice I say II for index instead of I. The reason for this is because if I search for I, there's an I, there's an I, there's an I. But if I search for II, it takes me directly to my for loop. So that's a little hint there. We'll say contact, test contact equals new contact. And let's go ahead and make a list of contacts. Where we have our new list of contacts. And let's go ahead and say last name equals test. First name equals II. And account ID equals test account.id. So what we're going to do here is we are going to make our contacts to insert.add test contact. And then we are going to go ahead and insert our contacts to insert again at the bottom. And what this is doing is we are, again, making an integration test for our little controller class. And we want to make sure that we are hitting our service class as well. And that'll hit the selector class. So when we say it should return contacts, we're going to call the controller class method, which returns the service method, which returns the selector method, which is going to bring us a bunch of contacts. So let's go ahead and we'll say, now that we have our test data in our little test setup method, what we can do is say account test account equals select ID from account where name equals, and what did we call it? We called it test account. And then we'll do a test.start test. I like to tab in here so it's a little bit easier to see. And then we'll say list of contacts equal list of contacts returned contacts equals our controller method name view contact controller dot return contacts per account, where we have a parameter of the test account dot ID. And just want to pause here for a second while I write the test.stop test and make sure everyone is following. This is, again, kind of the brute force integration solution. And then we're going to rapidly go from here to discuss implementing the stub provider. And we'll see how long this test runs. And then we'll go into some stubbing and mocking with Apex Mockery.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Someone messaged asking, what do you mean by brute force test? And also, what's the usage of start test and stop test? Like those two questions I got for you.
Great questions. So when I say brute force, that's generally the if you're ever in a coding interview where you have to do like a leak code or a hacker rank, the brute force solution is the one that technically works, but it's not necessarily optimized, is generally how I would define that. So this test class will work. It'll give us our coverage that we need, but there's a bunch of different ways we can optimize for it. So we're kind of just like punching our test through and hoping for the best. The use of test.start test and test.stop test, basically, we all know there's governor limits in Salesforce. I like to refer to the governor limits in a way, the little metaphor that I use is because Salesforce is a multi-tenant architecture, that means that there's multiple companies on the same server. So I like to think of it as a big apartment building where Each company has their own apartment, and we're thinking about the hot water usage in the apartment building. So if Evelyn takes a really hot shower, but Sally is doing dishes, we have to have kind of a meter on the hot water so that Sally can do her dishes and Evelyn can take a shower, right? So we have those governor limits in Salesforce. And the test.start test and test.stop test allow us to kind of reset those governor limits in the context of the transaction. So that's how I like to think of it. There are a couple of other benefits that we won't necessarily go into. For example, it makes future methods run instantly. It makes callouts run instantly. And it kind of resets those transaction limits as well. Oh, and yes, we have the test account
Can
equals,
can
I
you
see
just read the
this.
question so people
Yeah,
are watching? Yeah, sorry.
sure, totally. No, so in the test method, we wrote select ID from account where name is test account, and this should actually have a limit 1 at the end. So good call out. I love it when people correct my code because I like to call this out because even if you're at the level that I am at in my career, you still sometimes make goofy mistakes. So I like to call that out for people. But so we know that this query is going to return something because we have the test setup method. So if we were doing this outside of the context of a test method, we would want to do something like list of account test accounts equals, and then we would do our query here without the limits, or we can do the limits. We'll leave the limit in here. And what this will do is if there are accounts, we can say test account equals test accounts, get the 0th index, which will get us the first account in that list. And if there are no accounts, this will be an empty list. So that is a more safe way to do this. So we can say if test accounts dot size, if I could spell today, my Z key is sticky today. So if this test accounts dot size is greater than 0, and this would be a safer way to write this. We know that this is going to return our count from our test setup because that's kind of how test classes work. So the safer alternative is to return this as a list, but we know this is going to return the 1 account because of the make data test setup method. And the test setup method runs before each method within the test class is called. Great questions. Any other questions so far?
I don't see any in the chat so far. I keep them going for you.
Y'all are rock stars. I love this. So okay, now that we have our test.start test and test.stop test, what we can do is write our asserts. And asserts is just making sure that the data we expect to see is the data that's returned. So we can do a system.assert, and let's do a assert equals where we have expected. We expect 5 contacts. So we want returned contacts.size. And then we can add a little message here that says we expect there to be 5 contacts returned because we inserted 5 related contacts. And I always advise people, this message is optional. We are going to see why we have this. And yes, it actually would be better to use the assert.r equal. I've been doing this for a while. So we can do assert r equal as well. And let's test and make sure that these are the same results. So the assert.r equal is the preferred nomenclature. This is, again, I love it when people call me out on having an old take or making a typo because 1, it means you know stuff, and 2, I still make mistakes sometimes. So I like to call that out. So let's go ahead and we're going to deploy this. And we'll hopefully we'll find out that we failed to run. Let's see what we've got. Oh, variable does not exist. Return contacts. View contact controller. Let's see where we go. Oh, illegal assignment from integer to string. That's because return contacts for account. View contact controller. List of contacts. And this is again, this is something I like to do these demos kind of live because let's make sure that the view contact controller is deployed. That one deployed successfully. Let's try deploying this one again. And then we'll see what the error is and we'll see if we can debug it really quick. Invalid type. Oh, duh, because I said contacts, not contact. Okay, here we go. List of contacts. So this one, this is a error that I see all the time where you'll just see something and you see that we know there's something wrong with the list. As we are debugging, which there is a whole chapter on debugging, we see that we have an error in line 11, 23, 26, and 27. And all of these errors cascade from the error in line, let's see, in line 23, where we have the invalid type of contacts. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have this right. New contact. Oh, and let's go string.value of the index, and then we'll go ahead and do change this to contact. So again, I like to do these coding demos live. I am not shy about the fact that I still goof up sometimes, and I like to say that for that reason. So now it deploys, and we are going to go ahead and run this test in Developer Console. We can run it in VS Code, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But we're going to run it in Dev Console because it's a little easier to see what we're going to try and do. So let's go ahead and do our view contact controller test. It should return contacts, and we'll say run. And hopefully this test passes. We have a success. We have tests. We have a test run. And it should return contacts, no errors. Let's go ahead and look at the logs for this, and I'll show you why we want to have that message at the end of the assert. Let's find it. So if we have let's go ahead and say we're going to change this to 4. And now the test should fail. And I'll show you why we want to have that message there. Give it a second to deploy, and then let's go rerun. And while we're waiting for it to run, we see this assertion failed. And when we open up this message, this is where that message appears. So we expect there to be 5 contacts returned because we inserted 5 related contacts. And now we can see this in the code, and we know why our test failed, and we put that little hint there for ourselves. So let's change this back to 5. And now we'll deploy one more time, give this a second to run, and then we'll run it again. And then we'll get into some more advanced topics while I've got you still. So we'll go ahead, make sure that this test runs, and then let's talk mocking and stubbing, which is like my favorite topic. It's, I don't know. And I find, so we'll go ahead and go to the GitHub for Apex Mockery. This is a piece of code that was put out by Salesforce. It is an open source code. Salesforce is not endorsing this presentation or the use of the code in the book, but it is open source. And the documentation leaves a little bit to be desired, in my opinion. So it is available under a BSD 3-clause license. I just want to call out, they're not endorsing this talk or anything. We're just going through and teaching you how to do it. So what we do in order to deploy Apex Mockery to our Salesforce org, and there are detailed instructions for this on the book, and I am sharing the link right now. Let me just drop this in the everyone chat. And I really encourage folks to go through this repo. It's a really helpful repo. There are detailed instructions on how to deploy everything to your Salesforce org in the book in chapter 13, which is all about Apex mocking and stubbing. But basically, we're going to scroll down in the README. There is this deploy to Salesforce button. We'll log into our Salesforce org, make sure we're in a developer org because we have our sandbox. And we're going to go ahead and deploy. And while this is deploying, we see it's queued in the bottom, status succeeded. Let's go back to our Apex testing terminology. And let's define the terms we're going to use. And yes, you would need to deploy it to production. So this is something that you would deploy it to UAT. You would deploy it to production because if you ever need to run all tests in production, you would need to do that. And generally, when you are doing deployments to production, all of the tests are run as you're deploying. And as for the question, is it safe enough to be used? Yes, absolutely. This is a piece of code that was put out by Salesforce. It is open source. I have used it in several orgs, and this is a lighter weight alternative to the FFlib or Financial Force Library mocking and subbing solution. So this is a code I really like. Like I said, put out by Salesforce. They're not endorsing this talk. It is open source, and you can examine the source code to ensure that it is copacetic with your org requirements. Oh yeah, let me move myself to the left. Hold on. Let's go over here now and hit share. Perfect. Okay, good call out. So going into, before I go into the definitions, let's say every org has security requirements, and especially the bigger org you're in. So if you were to deploy this, I encourage deploying to a developer sandbox first, so a developer org to play around with. If you were to deploy this to your production org at your job, you would need to create buy-in. You would have to make sure there's a security review, and you'd have to make sure your team's like okay with it. Don't just go and deploy this to your work computer. I am not liable for if you do. So, and that is all contained within the documentation for the Apex Mockery repo. But okay, so we are going to discuss unit testing, where again, we are going to have a little chunk of code. We're going to test it all at once, or all of the little chunks of code all at once. And in order to do so, we are going to work with fakes, mocks, and stubs. So a fake is going to be a working implementation of a real object that isn't suitable for production. And how we do this in Apex is we make up a fake ID. Apex allows you to take the first, the key prefix for your S object. I think 001 off the top of my head is either account or user. 003 I think is case. I probably have those way wrong. I'm doing this from memory, but we can take that key prefix and add a number to the end of it, and it will make a fake ID. And I'll show you how we do that in the book in just a second. We also have a mock, which determines how a method in our code is called, and it makes sure the method was called in the way we expect it to be called. So we want to make sure that if we're calling a method twice, we want it called twice in our test class. We also want to make sure that we're passing in the right parameters. A stub is a hard-coded canned answer that alleviates the need to hit the database, so we don't have to do DML. And what this is going to be is like, if I am expecting a certain value to be returned, then we use a fake to make a stub that will represent that value that we want returned. So to sum up, A mock uses stubs made of fakes to test our code in units. And this is something it's very hard to wrap your head around. So no worries if this is all gibberish. We will see it in action and we'll define it. And yeah, it's okay if you're lost. This is something that uh it took me probably a year of doing this every day to fully wrap my head around. So the book in chapter 13 goes way into detail on this, and we will go ahead and define this, and hopefully it'll make more sense when we see the code. So let's go ahead and switch back to Visual Studio Code. And in chapter 13, there are a bunch of different types of tests. I have the tests for chapter 3, 4, and 6 are all in here. We're going to go ahead and write the test for chapter 6 with Apex Mockery. And let's go ahead and do that. So the other term we need to define before I forget, let's go to the next slide if my hotkeys will work. I'm a Google Meets girly personally, but the other thing we are going to use is called a spy. So we are, and I'm going to finish this sentence and then I'll get to the question. The other thing we are going to work on is what's called a spy. And a spy allows us to kind of spy on the methods and say what we want the result of that method call to be. They allow us to retain real object functionality while monitoring interactions. And we are not actually going to enhance the view context controller test any further. That one is good the way it is, but we'll add to it so we don't have to create more files. So let's go ahead and let's actually check our level of code coverage while we have everything here. Let's go ahead and go to our view context controller, I think. Yes, and we see that if we check the code coverage, we have everything outside of the catch is covered. The catch, we'd have to throw an error in our test class, which is a little bit beyond the scope of this lecture. But we can also see, if we go to, let's go contact service, we should see, give it a second to load. This one should have coverage as well. 100% coverage. And then if we go to our contact selector, this one should have 100% coverage as well. Or, well, minus the chapter 10 method, because we haven't touched that one. So this allows us to, like the question we asked at the start, we can write one test for the controller, service, and selector method. And this is just to demonstrate that. So we have one test method that gives us most of the coverage we need if we ignore the chapter 10 method that we haven't looked at yet. So let's go ahead and go back to VS Code. And we will go ahead and at the bottom of this, we will add some more test classes. So we're going to, or test methods, excuse me. Let's go ahead and add is test. Oh my gosh. Killing me today. Private static void. Let's go ahead and say selector. It should. So what we're going to do here is we are going to go ahead and take a look at the basically the mocking and stubbing. And again, it's okay if you're lost. I am going to try to make this make sense as we go through because it's easier to see in practice than it is to wrap your head around. There are a lot of essays. If you know anything about like hardcore computer science, there's a guy named Martin Fowler who is like a big time computer scientist that writes an essay about what mocks versus stubs are, and it's very dense and hard to understand. So I'm going to try and break it down. And question, will we write the selector method here or start a new test class just for the selector? That is going to depend on your company coding standards. So generally, I like to write test classes for a feature altogether. So we are going to write all of the chapter 6 tests together just for sake of ease. But generally, because the contact selector class will have methods for other chapters, usually it's best to do a contact selector test method, a contact service test method, and then a contact controller test method. So, short answer, it depends. And we're going to do it this way so we have it all in one file for one feature. So, okay. And let's go ahead. The next question in the architecture below, and I'm going to copy this. Sally, can you copy this question to the main chat if it's not in there? So everyone can see,
Yeah,
so I don't botch the narration.
Yeah,
Perfect.
let me do it.
You're the best. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in the architecture below, where we have the controller pointing to the service class, pointing to the selector, which touches the database, if we test the controller layer, which layer should be mocked and why? So this one, the layers that should be mocked are going to be the selector the selector and the service class. And the reason for this is every controller method has to be static. We cannot mock static methods. So easy rule. Everything in the controller would generally be an integration test, or we can mock the lower levels and then run this, but we cannot mock the controller layer class. And we will see why in just a second. So, okay, let's go ahead and let me minimize this Google Chrome. So while we are doing our test accounts, let me go ahead and I'll go a little bit into the background of the book as well. There is a whole setup chapter 00, that you deploy this folder and then run some anonymous Apex that basically inserts test records into your developer org. If you were in a production org, you would want to use the cookbook as examples versus deploying it to your org, just because we don't want to deploy test data to org. But if you have a developer edition org, you would deploy this chapter 00. And in this chapter 00, there is this util fake ID generator. And this is what I was talking about, where we can take the key prefix of an S object and then add a string of zeros with a number at the end of it to create a fake ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this in developer console one more time. And let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So we'll do our execute anonymous window. We're going to do system.debug. And we'll go util fake ID generator. And we'll go ahead and let me make sure I have my name right, first of all. Util fake ID generator. And then let's go ahead and grab the method name as well. Get a fake ID. And this is what's called method overloading. We have two methods that have the same name with different parameters. This is something that is part of polymorphic Apex. There is a big description of method overloading and method overriding in the book. Pretty happy with that. So if basically we have the same method, it does the same thing, but this method, we accept an S object, and this one we accept an S object type to generate our fake ID. So what we will do, on the get fake ID, and let's do new account, name equals test account. Make sure we have the right number of parentheses. And let's go ahead and open the log and see what this does. Oh, util fake ID generator. Let me make sure I have this deployed. Deploy this real quick. So how's everyone feeling? I like to get, when I'm coaching rad, I like to get like a thumbs up, a middle, a down. How are we feeling? I usually get about a middle until we get to the point where we've got the code. Because again, it's okay if it's hard to wrap your head around. This is an advanced topic. Actually, the Salesforce documentation says if you if you think that mocking is making fun of someone, this topic is too advanced for you. And that's the literal Salesforce documentation says that. And I find it very funny. So I like to mention that. But so this is an advanced topic. We'll go ahead and now this should be deployed. We have this. Let's go ahead and look at our debug. And we have this 000 or 001, a bunch of zeros, and then one AAA. So this looks like our account ID. So this is our fake ID we're going to use, and we'll go ahead and build that out. So going back to our VS Code, we have this get fake ID method, and let's see how we use it. So coming back to our all-encompassing test class, what we'll do first, we are going to prepare our data. And generally, we would do this in a factory class or a test data setup class. We're going to go ahead and do this here now, though, just to save us some time. So let's go ahead and we'll do our test account equals new account. And then we'll do test account dot name equals test account. And then we're going to go ahead and we can't do this normally. So generally you can't assign an ID if you're about to insert something, but we aren't actually going to insert this account. We are just going to go ahead and make a fake account with a fake ID. So this account can go to bars. It's got the little fake ID. If that helps you remember it, I don't know. I just think it's funny. So let's go ahead and we've got our util fake ID generator. We're going to go ahead and say get fake ID. And then we're going to do test account, where that parameter, again, if we look at the parameter, we have a generic S object, which can be our test account. So what this is doing, and normally in our test make data up here, we would insert this account, but because we're not actually hitting the database, we have our fake ID. We don't need to insert anything. So next thing we're going to do, similar to our test data factory, we're going to say contact instead of contacts this time. Let's go ahead, contacts to return equals new list of contacts. And let's go back up to our data class, and we're just going to copy this. We have our little for loop. We are adding our contacts here, except instead of inserting these contacts into the database, we're going to go ahead and make some fake contacts. So let's go ahead and do our new contact, test contact dot last name is the required field. We'll go test contact dot first name equals string dot value of II. So we get the string value of the number. And then we are going to go ahead and say test contact dot account ID equals test account ID. And it should be test account dot ID, excuse me. So what we're doing here is we are taking this fake ID and we're building a fake relationship. So this fake ID here is going to have a little fake ID for the account relationship. And then what we can do is say test contact.id and give our contact a fake ID as well. So let's go ahead and do our util fake ID generator. But instead, we're going to do test contact instead of test account. So let's go ahead and instead of saying context to insert, we're going to do context to return. And now this is the bulk of our preparation section. And let me close out of this. So we have prepared our test data here. Next thing we are going to do is we are going to arrange our fake data into our mocks and stubs. And next question, controller, service, and selector. Is it a separation of concerns framework approach? Yes, it is. So the separation of concerns framework is something that's a pretty standard computer science topic. Basically, you want your business logic to be in one class, you want your queries to be in one class, and you want your presentation to be in one class as well. This is also kind of related to the model view controller framework in Salesforce. And then, and the next question, if we will do all the preparation to insert the account and contact, what is the benefit of faking IDs versus inserting? And we'll see in a second. So the benefit of using the fake IDs is we don't have to hit the database. These contacts with the fake ID are going to be returned in place of real contacts, so we don't have to waste time inserting them into the database. And we'll see the test class time difference in just a second. So we have our selector should return contacts. And now what we're going to do is we are going to arrange our data in a way that allows us to mock them. So there are a number of objects. We added our Apex Mockery to our Salesforce org. And so one of these classes, there's a class called mock, and we are going to go util query mock. Oh, I need an equal sign here. And we're going to use the for type method of the mock class. And this line of code probably looks a little confusing. So I'm going to break it down for you. So in our contact selector class, we have this extends util query. And this util query class is something that I wrote for chapter 3. Let's find chapter 3. That's chapter 0, chapter 3. And this is another piece of the separation of concern where we have this virtual class, virtual meaning we can extend or implement it as an interface. And then we have these methods. So we have the query method that returns the database query of a query string, query with binds, same thing, database.query with binds. And then we have a search method that uses the search.query instead of the database.query. So if you know a little bit about Apex, this is what's known as dynamic sockle and dynamic sossle. What we do in our selector class is we use our query result, and then because we have extended this util query class, we can use the query with binds method, and we can use the query method of our util query class. So where we have the get context for account, we have query with binds here, where we map the account ID to our bind variable. Our query up here is just select ID, salutation, first name, last name, all the way to title from contact, where the account ID is the account ID, order by created date. Oh, geez, let's not mess this up super bad. Order by created date, where it's descending. So again, the book goes into virtual and abstract classes pretty in depth. I was really sure to dive into what all that means, but this is a little bit of polymorphism in Apex and object-oriented principles. So let's go ahead and go back to our controller class. So now that we know what the util query class is doing, that virtual class, we are making a fake version of this class. We're mocking it. We're not making fun of it. We are basically saying, hey, instead of using the util query class directly, we are going to make a fake implementation of it so that we can insert the data we want to insert. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to make a method spy for query spy, called query spy, where we have our util query mock, and we are going to spy on the query method. So again, this line of code may look a little confusing. Let's dive into it. This method spy class is you'll notice that like we're defining this similar to where we have account new account equals new account, right? So these are an account in Apex is a class. It is an extension of the SObject class, whereas the mock is a class of type mock. The account is a class of type account. This is a class of type mock, and this is a class of method spy. And we won't get into the Apex Mockery code just because it's a little beyond the scope of this, but I highly encourage everyone to dive into that repo later tonight. So what we're doing here, we're saying, hey, we're going to spy on this query. The query is named query, and we know it's named query because of our util query class. We have our contact controller. Let's go ahead and go to our contact selector. We want to say query with binds, actually. Let's go ahead and do query with binds here. And then the next thing we are going to do is we are going to have our contact selector class. My contact selector equals new contact selector. So this is creating that instance of the contact selector class. So now what we're going to do, we have our spy called query spy, query spy. We're going to say it returns once, and then we're going to grab our contact to return. And this is something that, again, this line of code looks a little confusing. We're going to break it down. So again, our spy is, we're spying on the method to say, what's it doing? Can we insert our own thing? And yeah, we can. So we're spying on the method, and our query spy here, we're spying on the query with binds method. And then we're going to say, hey, this method, the query with binds method, we want it to return one time with these contacts to return. So basically, when we are going to the contact selector, when we have this query with binds method, instead of actually querying the database, we are returning our fake contacts. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Now we are going to act, and let's go ahead and say list of contact. My contacts equals, we're going to take the instance of the class, my contact selector, and we're about to have Gizmo join us on camera, hopefully. So Gizmo is one of my cats. He's very cute. We're going to say contacts per account, where we have the account ID. And remember, we have this fake account ID up here. We're going to go testaccount.id with our fake ID. And this should bring up our fake contacts with our fake account ID. Again, none of this hits the database, so it's going to go incredibly fast. And let's go ahead and do some assertions. So my favorite way to do assertions and test is if we do a for loop, do for integer jj equals 0. JJ is less than 5 because we should have 5 contacts. JJ plus plus. And you'll note I use JJ here because I used II here. I'm going to say contact current contact equals my contacts, the JJth index. I'm going to say assert dot is true. Yep, assert dot is true is the new one. We're going to say current contact dot last name equals test. And then we'll go ahead and say, yeah, we'll go ahead and try that. So let's go ahead and deploy this. And we'll add our message here as well. We'll deploy this again in just a second. We expect all last names for contacts to be test. Deploy this one more time. And now what we'll do is we'll run this test really fast. We'll make sure that this is copacetic. We're going to run it in VS Code so we can see how fast this runs. We'll bring this up a second. Apex test fails to run. Oh, target org changed. Oh, that's my bad. Okay. Let's go ahead and we'll do this in developer console because I have two different orgs set up. I have like 73 sandboxes, by the way. It's kind of absurd. So if you're like me and you're getting everything, all the emails from Salesforce, delete your sandboxes. And okay, so the contact IDs will all be the same. So let's go ahead and first question, will the contact IDs, the fake contact IDs all be the same? The answer is no. So when we have the util fake ID generator, we have this static integer at the top. And what the static integer means is that for every instance of the class, this static variable is going to increase by 1 every time we generate the new ID. So all of the contact IDs will be +1 from the last one. Next question, what is the purpose of doing mocking? We could insert and select data. Is it just faster to run? And yes, so it is faster. It does unit tests, and it makes sure that we are getting the expected results. Next question, it sounds harder and won't actually be testing the selector. It will always pass even if someone messes up the selector class, right? No, that's actually not true. So we do unit tests because we pass in everything for the selector, but then we would do, this is why you do the unit test for every method, not just the selector class. We're just doing the selector class because it's a little bit easier to show. So when we have the mocking for the service class, we would then test the selector class. So if we remove the logic in the selector class and return null, it will still pass. So we can return null. Basically, the purpose for doing the mocking is to make sure that it doesn't hit the database, which we'll see how much faster it is in just a second. And the purpose of returning the expected results for the query is ideally there is going to be a method that returns null. There is going to be a method that returns improper data. There is a test method that returns null, a test method that returns improper data, and you call each of those test methods to make sure. And that's why we have unit testing. So we want to test all of our edge cases. This is just one of the use cases, and this is the easiest one to demo. So that's why we're doing this one specifically. But generally with mocking and stubbing, it goes faster. It doesn't hit the database. Again, you can run 1,300 tests in under 8 minutes versus taking 12 hours. And ideally, you have integration tests as well, because there are some cases in which you need to have integration tests, such as for static methods and triggers. So with a combination of integration tests and unit tests, it makes your testing more effective. It goes faster, and we test everything as chunks so that everything goes through properly. So let's go ahead and we will do a new run. We're going to do our view contact controller test. And let's go ahead and run both of these and see what happens. So we have our tests. Let's go ahead and, oh, let me refresh this so I know which test is which. Let's go ahead, test, new run, and let's see what happens. Attempt to dereference a null object. I love that. It should return contacts. Let's go ahead and see where this error is. Line 59. Line 59. Current contacts, JJ. Let's make sure. Oh, this should be query, not query with binds. Play this one more time. And let's try one more time. Run both of these. View controller test. It should return contacts. Let's go ahead and say this one failed and that one. Okay, so attempt to dereference null object in line 59 as well. Let's make sure we have everything. Method spy on query in line 59. Current contact equals my contacts, my contact selector. Let's check and make sure we have my contact selector is new contact selector and contacts to return. So what this should be doing, I have a typo somewhere, which I'm going to debug in just a second, but what this should be doing is returning our contacts per account, which have our fake contacts. And we want to go ahead and make sure that this is doing this appropriately. Contacts per account return. Make sure we have the right method name, my contact selector, contacts per account. And we have the test account ID, test account ID. Contacts to return, returns once. Let me make sure I deploy this one more time. And then how many? Let's go ahead and instead of doing the for loop, let's make sure that we have at least one. Let's go ahead and we'll test to make sure this is working before we do that. So let's go my contacts dot size should equal 5 because we expect there to be 5 fake contacts. Okay, let's go ahead and deploy this one more time. Oh, sizes. Heh. My Z key is sticky, so is true. And then let's go ahead and try this one more time. 1122. Let's see why this one fails. It should be, and this is all part of it. MCD reference null object in line 60. Okay, let's see what line 60 is. And this is something that there is a whole chapter on debugging that helps us to do that. So we have list my accounts equals my contact selector, contacts per account. Let me just check and make sure I have everything appropriate. Test account.id. Let's go ahead. I am missing. Let's go ahead and paste that from my notes. And thank you for your patience. This is something that live demos are always fun. The first demo I gave for this book was a disaster, so I appreciate your patience with me. I have thoroughly tested all of the code in the book about 100 times, so we have more than 100 times, really, but Let's go ahead and run it one more time and see what happens. Attempt to dereference a null object. Okay. We will go ahead and we're just going to copy this from my notes to make sure that I don't have any typos. And it should be similar, and we'll find the difference in just a second. I love doing live demos, by the way. They're terrifying. Which is actually my pitch. Not a very good pitch, but I highly recommend. There we go. I highly recommend if you like doing stuff like this. It is possible to get into community conferences and stuff. So highly recommend doing those. And let's go ahead and try running this in VS Code now that we know that it is working. And I'll point out the difference in a second. It should be just a typo. So we have the test report is ready. Open the report. Apex test results is awesome. So we have 3 tests that pass, and we have the it should return contacts took 40 milliseconds, and the selector it should return contacts took 97 milliseconds, and the total test pass includes the test data setup method. So let's go ahead and find why that wasn't working, and then I'll leave it open for questions. But you see, having the mocking makes your test run in a matter of milliseconds versus whole seconds. So let me go ahead and see. Add the new contact. Oh, I see where it was. Okay. So I did the fake ID for the new contact, and I didn't have it in the same place. So TLDR, summarizing what I copy pasted from my notes that was working versus what I wrote from my notes that wasn't. We did a new contact here versus referencing the same contact. So that is me trying to be tricky and failing at it. So any questions? I will go ahead and drop the repo. So what are the difference between mock and stub? That's a great question, and one that is hotly debated. A mock is going to determine whether or not you called a method in a certain way. And then a stub is going to be the fake data that you return as the result of the method call. And yes, implementing this solution will allow us to run all tests at once. And I've never seen that working with my own eyes. Yes, I have seen it with my own eyes. Like I said, the last org I was in ran all tests in about 8 minutes, and there were about 1,300 of them. And here we did here mock, stub, or spy. We did all 3. So we have our mock util query mock, which is going to mock the method that we are spying on. So the util query mock is making a fake of the util query class. We are then spying on the query method, and then we're using the fakes data up here to populate our stub. So we did all 3 there. Any other questions? There is a discount on the book. Sally shared the link, and here's a QR code as well. Use the discount code though. So yeah, any other questions for me?
There was a question that came after as well now. Someone is asking, so like here in the example you did, you had the mocks, stub, and the fake. So that means the 3 of them go together. It's not like one over the other. Like we have to work the 3 together at once.
Yes. So you use the fake data to create your stub that is returned when you called the mock method, basically. So they all 3 work in conjunction.
Okay. And the question that I got as well, Evelyn, but I didn't paste it yet for you. But the question was, let's say you have the query selector that, for example, return data. But in real projects, maybe you forget to deploy or you forget to give a certain profile access to read the data of the object. So in real project, like when the selector will run, no data will come back. But here in the, if
Correct.
we are using the mocking, the data will return regardless, whether even if we add the run as user, like the data will run regardless or no,
You would
because
write a
what's the question?
new, no. So you would write a new test method that would return different data that you would expect to see with the user that you're running as.
But
So
if
you,
someone
that's the purpose.
run it this like the same
Mhm.
way as we did and return all the context, it will return. Even if the same user in real project would run it, won't return data, right? So it's not actually hitting the database or checking that you are actually getting data versus the integration. Like the integration testing would actually
Mhm.
test everything for you. But the mocking, you're mocking what's the result you want to return it versus it's actually testing the logic will run as expected or not in getting the data. That's the question like I received in the other chat.
Yes. So it would be kind of a combination of both. So if, for example, it's correct, integration tests hit the database, mocks do not. So in order to replicate a situation where we would have a user that gets, like, say you have your admin user who is supposed to have a different query result than your chatter user, just to use two profiles off the top of my head. Um, or let's do admin and advocate is a better example. So if the advocate is only supposed to have access to the records that they own, we would want to mock records that they own. If the admin is going to have records, we would mock different records, and then we would use the run as functionality there. So um, this is the this is why you would have multiple unit tests for every edge case. So an edge case is going to be the kind of the situations that you plan for and don't necessarily plan for. So examples of common edge cases are we want to make sure two users query different data. We want to make sure that if we insert over 200 records at a time, it's not going to crash. Other similar examples of edge cases, there's a pretty good Salesforce developer blog about it, if I remember correctly. But ideally, you would have a test method for each of those scenarios in a mocking and stubbing situation.
Okay. One test like scenario that came to my mind when you are talking that
Mhm.
I see the mocking can be very useful for is whenever we want to test for exceptions. Because sometimes like you have the try
Yes.
and catch, but like you cannot simulate really that the exception will happen or an error will happen easily. So
Mhm.
maybe that would be a good use case for using the mock.
Yeah. And well, so what I typically do when and here, let me share my screen again, and we'll just do a scenario for this. Let's go back to VS Code and let's do content only so I'm not blocking the screen. So if we want to test let's do an is test, escape that so it doesn't autocomplete private static void. It should test exception. One of the things we can do in test classes is we can actually throw an exception. So um, if we want to do something like this, we would have to do it in a try catch block so that we can catch it within our test class. And this is just me doing this from memory. So I might get it wrong, but let's say we want to test, let's go back to, oh, I'm sharing VS Code, of course. So let's go ahead and go back to our contact service, sorry, contact controller, and we want to catch this exception. In our test class, we can actually throw this kind of exception and make sure that it is caught. So we can do it that way.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
let
we're
me
right
see.
at time. So any other questions?
There is one more came in the chat now, in the everyone chat. So can we use mocking to change record create date in test?
Create date. Oh yeah, sorry, that took a second for me to interpret, but yes, we can set the created date on a mocked record to whatever you want. And because it's not a real record, you can easily fake that. So that is a field that is settable on a mocked record, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yes, and
Yeah,
we
thank
are
you for
on
having
time.
me.
It was a great session, Evelyn. I'm really grateful for your time and being here. And everyone, get the book. It would be a great book. And uh, also, like maybe I can convince Evelyn in the future. When we collect a lot of questions about something in the book, we can create like some sessions Q&A about the book and things like you want more explanation. Maybe if Evelyn is open for that, we can do
I'd be honored.
it.
Thank you for having me. Oh, and this is Cujo. She just ran across the screen. So
Yeah. So
have a great day, everyone.
thank
Happy
you so much.
Tuesday.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for everyone who's watching, you can check the recording on Code with Sally YouTube, and we'll see you next this week on Thursday, and next week with our next guest speaker. And thank you so much, Evelyn. Bye.